Okay, my name is Benjamin White. I'm here in Chico, California with Kelly Dahlgren and Shelby Mayers. We're here to interview David L. White for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. He was born September 22nd, 1918, and served in World War II as a private first class in the Army. Okay, David, why don't you tell us about what you were doing before the war, where you were born, and just kind of...
I was born in Riverside, California, and I was the fifth child in a family of six. And all of my brothers are now dead. My sister and I are the only ones of our family still living. She's 91 or 92 and lives in Southern California, and I'm 89 right now. As you've heard about World War II, and you know that almost everybody who was the right age was in it. All six of the members of my family, my sister had a husband, so all of her five brothers and her husband were in this war. So you know it was a big one. It wasn't just something like what we experienced now and then. It happened, of course, as you've heard, by the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, and that was a very shocking thing to our nation. 3,000 people were killed, and it really made us realize we had to get in this war and get working. So they started the draft, and I wasn't drafted till later on because I was in college at the time the war started, and I was going to Santa Barbara State College, and I was in a teacher training program. So when I got through there, they were drafting people, but I wasn't drafted 1A yet because I was teaching. I took a job teaching for a year in San Joaquin Valley, a little town near Bakersfield.
Okay, so how did you get drafted? When did that happen?
I got a draft notice while I was teaching that year in Shafter, California, and they told me they would be taking me the following fall, so I shouldn't start another teaching year. So I told them I wouldn't be coming back next year. It was my first year teaching, so I wasn't sure if they were going to hire me back, but I acted like I was sure they were, and they were. And that was that. So then fall came and they still hadn't drafted me. So I took a job at the Ream Manufacturing Company making barrels. They made those big 55-gallon drums that people put gasoline or other things like that in. And I learned how to make them, and it went on until, well, not too long. Let's see, October 14th, I was drafted. And they gave me a 3-week furlough right away after drafting me. That was to make me feel good about it. I guess they weren't ready for me yet. So they did, and 3 weeks later, I showed up, and they sent me to my first assignment, which was infantry training. The infantry is a part of an army that does the real fighting. They have Air Force that supplies air support, and they had artillery that lobbed big, heavy explosive at the enemy from a ship or someplace like that. But the infantry were the guys that went in and did the job. They carried a rifle and they were ready to really rough it. It wasn't just like camping. So they sent me first for 17 weeks of basic infantry training. That 17 weeks, boy, it began with a bang. I found out that first night that they don't take you for hot chocolate after the meeting. You work all day and then you go for a hike after dinner. Every day, except Sundays, for 17 weeks. And we learned so many things. I didn't think there was that much stuff I didn't know. We learned how to fire every kind of a weapon there is in the Army, and particularly our own rifles. We had M1 rifles, which I'm sure are obsolete now. They have much better ones. But we thought ours were pretty good because you could pull your trigger and keep pulling it till you'd shot 10 times. You didn't have to go like this. That's called bolt action. You just kept pulling the trigger, and after 9 rounds, something flew out. I forget what it's called. It's what the rounds bullets are loaded into. And then you reach in your belt here and you pull out another one of those and shove it in, and you're ready for 9 more rounds. That was pretty automatic for me. At that time, I'd never heard of a gun that was automatic. You had to aim it and then you had to cock it. This cocked itself. So anyway, I did my 17 weeks of basic training at Camp Roberts, California. And that's all they did there. They knew how to do it. We had a number of officers there who had been in combat, and they told us all the things. They taught us how to hold a rifle and squeeze the trigger. If you pull it, you jerk the gun, and who knows where your round will go. You squeeze the trigger very gently. Of course, I don't know if I ever really learned that, but that's what they told us to do. We learned how to fire all kinds of other weapons, even though we didn't usually use them. So after our 17 weeks, they took us up for a 25-mile hike. 25 miles? I didn't think a person could walk that far. But they took us on they called it a camping trip. But we went and camped out like we really were in the Army. And we acted like we really were. And then at the end of 3 days of hard work, late into the night some nights, 5 p.m. that day, they said, okay, now you're ready for your 25-mile hike. And they gave us directions and told us to show up out there. I think it was about noon when we left. They said it was in the morning. That was a long time ago. In the morning, we had all day. We hiked in the daylight. So we all set off, and all of us had his own speed. And we had to carry our rifle and all of the equipment we would use in battle, everything that we would need. So it was just like really hiking in battle. It took approximately 8 hours to go the 25 miles, and I never thought I'd never walked that far in my life at one time before. And I thought I couldn't do it, but I did. My feet hurt a little bit. And then they sent us on pass because we weren't any good to them. We went home and told our families how great we were. We went on a 25-mile hike and we learned all these things. And then they called, I forget when we were called back. We had to go back and go to some other places for mostly processing. I think they knew right then where we were going, but it wasn't going to be for a while. So they sent us to Camp Stoneman in Pittsburg, California. And you could tell it was a depot. It was a place where they had all kinds of soldiers waiting to be sent somewhere. And divisions or some other apparition of a war machine were coming through, and when they were short some men, they'd say, well, I need 7 infantrymen, and I need this and that. And we were like on a supply shelf. I was one of the 7 infantrymen, and so I went with them, and it wasn't too long. I was, the division I went with was airborne. I was in the 187th Paraglider company, regiment, and that was part of the 11th Airborne Division. No, they wouldn't tell us that. That's right. They didn't want anybody telling anybody that the 11th Airborne was setting sail, because we weren't going in a convoy. We were going one ship all by ourselves. So they didn't even tell us till after we aboard ship where we were going and what we were going to do. And we did. We sailed out of San Francisco Bay on May 17th of 1943. It was a 30-mile trip, 30-day trip, 30 days on the ocean. And the ship was so crowded, you had to take your turns for sleeping, eating, and everything. The bunks were like 6 high. Somebody would be close to the floor, and the next man this much higher, this much. You had to slide into your bed. And we went across the ocean that way to Buena Bay, which was a place where we were going to do training. When we got there on the 30th day, the ship came in close to the shore and dropped anchors, and they put rope ladders over the sides. And we were supposed to load up all of our gear, our rifle, and all of our ammunition, and all of our clothing. And we had a duffel bag in case we had personal things. We had to carry everything while we climbed down a rope ladder into a little boat, it looked like. And I had never seen a boat like that before. It had a driver's seat with a regular driving place. And the driver, after we all got in, he started driving it, drove it straight toward the shore, and lo and behold, it had wheels on the bottom. We pulled up out of the water on these wheels and up onto a road and went 20 miles inland to a place where we were going to stay. They had tents already erected for us there, and
well, what happened there? What did you learn there?
well, we stayed there, I forget how long, it must have been about 6 months. While we were there, we did a lot more training. They informed us all that we were going to be paratroopers. We weren't just going to be infantrymen, we were going to be parachute infantry. Well, I had already promised my wife I wouldn't do that if I had the choice. And I would like to have done it. But we did have a choice, so I said no, I didn't want to do it. They didn't like me very well for that, but they had to accept it. But anyway, while we were there, even if I wasn't going to be a paratrooper, I had to learn how to do all the things paratroopers do. We built a 350-foot tower. That's pretty tall. And we got to climb up there, and from there you put on a parachute harness and you jump off, and you're something comes from your shoulders just like a parachute, and you go gliding down about 200 or 300 yards into a big pile of hay. It was kind of fun, really. Scary looking, but once you got used to the idea that you see a bunch of other people go off and none of them get killed. So when my turn came, I jumped off. They said you have to do it like this because the parachute traps will come up and pull against your ears. So every time you jump into a parachute, you go like this. Right after you pull the ripcord and jump out of a plane, you do that too. So anyway, that was parachute training. And while we were there, we also had glider training. They said those who didn't go in parachutes would go in a glider. I'll just go here, unless you're real interested.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the glider training was interesting. They were made out of an aluminum frame covered with canvas. And they didn't have any propeller, and they didn't have any jet. They were towed by an airplane. And so we had learned that the glider was capable of holding 13 men and their equipment. So we got in it with all of our equipment, and on the runway, then we saw a plane pull up in front of us, a C-47. That's an old workhorse for the Army, and some of them are still running. They were so well made. All over the world there are C-47s. Anyway, they hooked onto us, and the pilot and co-pilot sat in the front, and there's a thing like a gear shift up here, and they showed it to us. They said when we pull on this, we disconnect from the plane and we go gliding down all by ourselves. And that was kind of a scary thing at first, but we did that. And it was a 200-mile ride and terribly noisy because all the canvas rattled. But when we got over where we were going to, the pilot reached up and grabbed that and pulled it, and suddenly there was dead silence. All the rattling was caused by being pulled by a plane. And there we were about 200 feet up in the air, just coasting along. And the pilot's job was to keep us coasting. If we go too slow, we might fall tail first. If we went too fast, we might fall head first. So he had to make our descent and go into a kind of a big circle and come around and land on the runway, which he did beautifully. And it was a very fun thing to do. So while I was there for a couple of weeks, we took up some more glider rides, and then we went back to our location. And pretty much then we were ready to ship out. I was put into the service company of the regiment. Every regiment had, at that time, 2 battalions. A battalion can be different sizes, but it's 2 or more. A battalion is 2 or more companies, and a company is 2 or more platoons, and a platoon is 2 or more I forget what you call them, or 8 men in a squad. So there we were. I was put into the service company, which was kind of a nice deal because we got to do different things. just all kind of almost anything. Then if they need you somewhere, they can send you to one of the other places. So we lived on a big airstrip where we just kind of practiced. And we got our food from Australia, and it wasn't their best, and it wasn't really very good even. They canned their butter. I never heard of canned butter, but now I guess we have canned butter. They were ahead of us in inventing that. So we had a place to eat. They called it mess. I guess it's because it's a messy thing to do. They have mess call. Whenever you call mess call, you grab your canteen and your mess kit and run out and get in line. You get to the place where, oh, you don't want to go all the details, do you?
Oh, sure.
You dip your mess kit in hot water and shake it up and down so you don't get any germs. Then you go through the mess line and hold out your mess kit, and the chefs and his helpers fill it with this and that and the other thing. And when you get through, you take it to a table and eat your meal. So anyway, we've been at this place better part of 6 months when they told us we were moving. Didn't tell us where we were going. So we had to pack up all our stuff, and just like it was when we came. And we went out and we got in, I don't think we got in those same little boats. I don't remember. They got us onto a ship one way or another. And we went to another island. We went to the Philippine Islands. The Philippine Islands there's more than 100 islands. They're various sizes. The biggest one is Luzon, which has the big city of, they call it the Pearl of the Orient. Oh, I can't remember the name of it. It's a beautiful big city. Whatever. Our job, we found out pretty soon what our job was there. It seems that this had been a place where they had taken it back from the Japanese, but they hadn't gone through looking for all the Japanese. They got all those who came out with their hands up and whatever they did, but those who went and hid somewhere were still in there. So I was with a group that was assigned to go looking for them. So we had our guns and we didn't take all of our stuff. We just took what we needed, our mess kits and a poncho, because it rained every single day, at least once. This was the rainy season. And we started at, I guess, maybe about 30 or 40 of us, probably two companies of a battalion. And we didn't know where we were going. We just started walking. But soon we were inland. Now, we were on the island of Leyte, Leyte. And on Leyte, all the people live on the coast. Once you get inland, there's nobody. Of course, there were farmers there, but mostly it was like a jungle. So we started walking through Leyte, carrying our stuff, and they'd give us mess kits. We didn't need mess kits. We had them though, because we'd use them to eat. They gave us what they called K rations. A K ration is a box about the size of a Cracker Jack box. I don't know if they have Cracker Jack boxes where you are, but that's what that size they were. Only they were coated in deep wax, so you could throw them in a pot of water and they wouldn't leak. And each K ration is one meal. And we gave us about 6 of them, and we had enough pockets to put them in. And every time it was time for a certain meal, we'd stop and we'd get a place where we could get water. And we'd open up our K ration. It had in it various things like maybe a little can of corned beef hash that you open separately, or if it's breakfast, a little can of cereal maybe. You pour a little water in it and heat it up and stir it and it turns into cereal. That sort of thing is what was in K rations. They provided for everybody cigarettes. We were all smokers then, so it was good to have cigarettes. If you weren't a smoker, you became one, because, gee, they gave you free cigarettes. Why not smoke? But I was already a smoker. So you couldn't just smoke anytime you wanted, but every hour or so we would take a smoke break. I don't know if they called it that, but that's what it was. So we hiked this way all day and stopped we had breakfast probably before we started, but we had lunch and dinner. And at dinner time, we would lay our poncho down. We each had a blanket if we needed it. I think we did sometimes, mostly not. it was very warm. It wasn't too hot. It was just a very pleasant climate. So we would sleep through the night on the ground. That's all they had. And in the morning, we'd be on our way again. We went for several weeks like this. It was getting kind of monotonous and tiresome. We did find some Japanese, and somebody else dealt with them. I didn't, I don't know. We didn't shoot them or anything like that. If we found some that were dead, and we had to report them to have somebody come pick up the bodies. So anyway, after about a week, and this happened to be just before Christmas. And lo and behold, one day the path came to where we go up a steep place. We had to climb up this place. When we got to the top, it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It was filled with colored parachutes. And the reason was because parachute equipment, when it's dropped, like little howitzers, that's a small cannon, and the different items are identified by what color the parachute is. Because if you're on the bottom, you're waiting for a howitzer, you want to run to a purple one, because that's where your howitzer will be. They can even carry a Jeep in a parachute like that and drop it. It might bounce a little on its tires. And so, anyway, we came to the top of this place, and it was about a couple 100 yards long and 100 yards wide. And all these colored parachutes were there because they had just dropped a bunch of equipment when this place started. So all we did was stay there. And while we were there, we had better food. We had sea rations. Sea rations are, you get 3 cans about this high and this big around for every meal. And so we would get sea rations there. We stayed there over Christmas. That was a way of celebrating Christmas. And I'll tell you, it was like celebrating, to just lie around all day Christmas and eat sea ration. They didn't actually bring us presents or anything like that, but it was a nice day. So after that was over, Christmas and a day or so more, while we were there, we could hear an airstrip, and we heard planes taking off. And lo and behold, that's where we were going next. When we left there the morning that we were leaving, we went by this airstrip, and there were mostly C-47s coming in and out of there. I don't know what all business they were doing. But we got back then to the base where we had been, and we went back to, we had tents we had put up when we first arrived, and we went back to our tents where the rest of our equipment was, and we had a little time off to rest up before continuing. While we were there, though, I got to not feeling very well, and some of my buddies also. We felt like we were sick, and we went to they have a thing in the Army, they call it sick call. We went on sick call, and they said, "Oh, you're fine. And give us an aspirin maybe or something." So anyway, we found out we were going on a new adventure, and this time, I think we knew ahead of time what we were going to do. We were going to fly, we were going to go by boat. A small group of us, not all of us, about 200. And we were going to land on an island. The island that is called Luzon. That's the capital island and the biggest island. And there's Manila is the big city I couldn't think of before. That's the capital of the Philippines. So Manila is on the east coast of Luzon, and right opposite Manila on the back coast is where we were going to land. Forget the name of the place, but we were going to come in on shore landing boats, in combat. You could be shot at while you're going in. And I found out that I was going to be in the first boat, and right in the front of that first boat. In other words, I was the very first person going to hit the beach in this thing, and I was pretty scared. But I kept telling them I was sick, and they said, "You're just worried about this beachhead you're going to make. Once you land, you'll be fine." And so that's what we did. At 4 o'clock in the morning, we were on this destroyer. They got us up and fed us well for breakfast, and we got our stuff ready. And then they did a lot of shelling. The Navy came in with great big ships and big guns, and they shelled this beach. That means big explosives they delivered by air. for about half an hour. Then they decided if there was anybody there, they probably went inland or else they're dead. So we could go in, and they blew a whistle or something. No, they just started up the boats. And as I said, I was in the first boat. There was a row of 4, and then 4 rows of those. So as we went, I was on the far right, and I was scared to death. I've never been so scared in my life. But I just made up my mind, well, this is the end of my life. I've had a good life, and so, as long as I know I'm going to die, I don't have to worry about it. So that's kind of what I told myself as we went ashore. But I was about to throw up. I was so sick. But we went ashore, and I made our beachhead, ran up on the beach, and I found a carabao that had been hit with a shelling. That was dead. No people I just found. Not a soul met us. They had all fled inland. So we walked up the beach, and it was a kind of an interesting place. We found a house with some Americans living in it as we walked along, and we said hello to them, and they stood out at their front fence and said hello to us as we went by. I guess it was obvious we were going to Manila. Manila was being attacked from the Japanese still held Manila, and they were holding it in the front and in the back. So we were going to go over a mountain to get to Manila and come down the other side, whereas some other Army unit, or maybe Marines, would be attacking from the front, and maybe others. So there we were. We started out during the day, although I was in a mortar platoon, and during the place we found there might be some Japanese staying, so our mortar platoon had to go. What I carried, in addition to my own equipment, was 6 rounds of mortar ammunition. Each round weighs about this round, and about this long, weighs 10 pounds. So I was carrying 60 pounds of mortar ammunition in addition to my own equipment. And mortar ammunition don't all get together. They lie farther apart. And the 3 guys who were going to shoot the mortar, that's what that's called. Somebody had a base plate and somebody had a tube. And they go together, but they were carried separately. So they got where they thought that the Japanese were, and they sent somebody out ahead with binoculars to go to a high hill, try to look down on the place and see if he could see them. And I think they did see some, and so what they do is they shoot one, and the guy in the binoculars watches to see where it hits. So the first guy carrying 6 mortar operations ran up to where the mortar is, and we all moved up one. I was about 3rd in line, I think. And then the first one took his round up, and they got the mortar put together, and they guessed at how far away it was. And they go way up, and then they come down. And so they fired one. And if it's too far, they say it's long. Got to cut it back. If it's not far enough, it's short. And if it's too far one way, it's wide, or the other way, it's wide the other way. So they make corrections, and then they fire another one. And this one came just about right, except it was wide a little bit. So then they corrected for that and fired another one, and they said, the guy with the binoculars said, it's just right. So the next man ran up with his rounds. I was next after that. And then they fired 3 more without changing anything. 3 more rounds right to where they were. And that was the end of that. We didn't need any more rounds. That enemy was disposed of. We all ran back and got with our company and started walking up the hill. We had this 3,000-foot mountain we were supposed to walk over, and in a couple of days we were supposed to be there in Manila to join the fighting. All this time I was still feeling sick, I'll tell you. But I managed to walk all that day. During that day, one of our officers was killed. He wore very white-colored leggings. He was proud of them. He put them in bleach to get them nice and white. But anyway, somebody could see his white leggings. Some sniper somewhere shot him. He was the commanding captain of the whole mission. So somebody else had to take his place. But we hadn't lost anybody else yet. And so we told us we had to dig a foxhole for the night. You couldn't dig down 1/4 of an inch and there's much less deep enough to get in. It was a joke. So I could see that by midnight even I wouldn't have had a foxhole dug. So I just laid down my poncho and my other gear, and I went to bed early and went right to sleep. In the morning they waked us all up to get going. See, we weren't really in combat at this time. We had guards out, of course, but we weren't expecting to find anybody after us in the night, and we didn't. Anyway, before we left that morning, I was feeling so bad. I went to the medics and I said, could you just please give me an aspirin? And they said, you can't have an aspirin. What's the matter with you? And I said, oh, I've been sick. So they stuck a thermometer in my mouth. They said, you're sick, man. What are you doing on duty? So they immediately told me to go get in a hospital truck and took me all the way back down the hill and onto a ship. And some of the other guys I'd lived with were there too. I think we've all had the same ailment. Turned out we all went to the same hospital. We had contracted something was common. Can't think of the name. Very common disease that people get all the time. They have A, B, and C of it.
Hepatitis.
What?
Hepatitis?
Hepatitis. We had contracted hepatitis. So they sent us to a hospital where they would deal with it. And it took about 3 months to deal with that hepatitis. During that time, my company went on down the hill and fought the battle. And when I finally got back to my company, I only knew about half the guys because about half of them got gotten killed or injured. And that's pretty much my army duty. Although then I was assigned to be the group that was going to attack the island of Japan. Until a few weeks after that, the atomic bomb was dropped. And they said we wouldn't be going to Japan. Well, we would go to Japan as occupation troops. We got on the ship immediately and went to Japan as occupation troops. And that's the last combat operation that I had.
Well, tell us about Japan.
About the what?
Tell us about Japan.
Oh, Japan. When we got to Japan, they didn't expect. They were all very humble and wanted to bow to us all the time, and they did. And there was nobody committed any act of atrocity. They were completely submissive. And while I was there, those first few days, I was one of the very first. Our unit was the first people to get to Japan because we were already planning to go there, only on a different mission. And so I was standing on the shore looking out when I saw an American battleship come into the harbor. And I don't know if President Truman was on board or not, but General MacArthur was, and so was the Emperor of Japan. And I watched this signing of the Declaration of Peace, or war is gone. So I watched that. And we then were sent north 200 miles, our whole division was, to a place, very beautiful place, a kind of a resort. And that's where we had to stay for the next 6 months to really just enjoy Japan. But we were there in case it became we had to go back and fight, which we didn't have to do. And so, fortunately for me, that was my last combat. And I was awarded the Combat Infantry Badge, which is a nice thing to have. And I got ribbons to wear that said I was in the U.S. Asia Pacific Theater of War, and particularly the Lingayen Gulf, was where the island of Leyte was, and that sort of thing. But that's mainly my war experience, being scared to death going in on the first round, and I survived.
So what was it like to come home after the war? How was that?
I didn't come home for about 6 months. After about 6 months, in fact, it was the next, almost Christmas time. They picked out people to go home, just a few at a time. And because I had a wife and a daughter, I had a high score. It's called an ASR score, whatever that means. And I had a high enough score that I could be one of the first people to go home at that time. And I did. I sailed into Seattle just a couple of days before Christmas. And they said we'd have to take a train to Southern California. Some of the guys said, well, I'm going to be discharged here. He told them they want to be discharged in Washington. And I didn't choose that because I thought, what if something like that, I might want to get a loan from the state of California. And they say, well, you want a Cal vet? You stand. So it wouldn't have mattered, but I thought it might, so I chose to wait. And we probably came right through Chico on our way to Southern California on the train. We took us 2 or 3 days going all the time to get to Southern California. At that point, I was discharged on January 6th, right after that.
And then what'd you do? You went back to teaching?
Yes, I had been, let's see, yes I did. Teachers were so scarce and hard to come by. A good friend of mine that I'd been with at Santa Barbara had a job, and they needed somebody very badly right now. They were having double session clear up to the 8th grade. And so they had 2 8th grades here, and I went back and took one of them, and it was a delightful experience really to teach the 8th grade. I taught 7th and 8th grades for several years, and after that became a speech therapist and worked in all the grades and so on.
So it was really nice to come home to your family after?
It was very nice to come home to my family after it, and I'm glad I survived.
Okay, well, is there anything else you want to add?
Let's see. I don't know, are there any questions? Is there something I failed to tell you?
No, you did great. That was good. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything you...
Okay, good. There were a lot of things I did that I didn't tell you about, but nothing I was ashamed of. This place we stayed, it was interesting. It had a bathhouse, and it was a huge thing, bigger than most swimming pools, full of hot water. And it was just beautifully arranged with redwood boards to walk on so the water would drip. And we would go there, and we'd the Japanese came to this place from the neighboring places to do it again. And they, let's see, they used it too, but our whole unit could use it. They asked us not to go in the big pool. I think some people did, but I didn't. You were only supposed to dip the water out, wash yourself off, and put that in a waste place. Then get another pan of hot water and pour it over you. But you didn't put your whole body in the way some of our soldiers did. During the time we were there.
Go ahead.
During the time we were there, let's see. Oh, we met some little Chinese boys, or Japanese boys, I meant to say, and they took us on a picnic one time to a beautiful place called Matsushima, and we went to an island called Shiogama, and we had this lovely picnic there, and I just can't imagine anything more beautiful than this country place we went. We went on the Interurban Railroad, kind of like the big railway cars we used to have in California, Southern California. And that's the sort of thing we did while we were waiting. I was anxious to be home, but while I was there, it was pleasant. And we had good food then, I think. I don't know.
Well, if that's all, do you have anything else? That was excellent. Thank you.
Can't think of anything else, but
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions that come up.